The massive observation deck of the Krillian Empire's flagship stretched across an entire kilometer, its crystalline walls offering an unobstructed view of the void. Admiral Zexthor stood motionless, his 6 eyes fixed on the tactical display floating before him. The holographic projection showed something that had never appeared in their star charts before: a ship of unknown origin, drifting at the edge of their territory. "Magnify Sector 779, Zexthor commanded, his voice carrying the weight of 3 centuries of military service. The image zoomed in, revealing more details of the mysterious vessel. It was smaller than their standard patrol craft, perhaps only 200 meters in length. Its hull was a dull gray metal, scarred and pitted for what appeared to be countless micrometeorite impacts. No visible weapons arrays, no shield generators that their sensors could detect, no faster-than-light drive signatures that matched any known civilization. "How long has it been there?" the Admiral asked, turning to his tactical officer. "Unknown, sir. It appeared on our long-range sensors approximately 6 hours ago. No approach vector, no hyperspace wake. It's as if it simply materialized." The bridge fell silent. In the 10,000 years since the Krillian Empire had achieved dominance over this sector of the galaxy, they had cataloged every spacefaring species, conquered or allied with every civilization worth noting. An unknown ship was not just unusual, it was impossible. "Have we attempted communication?" "Yes, Admiral. We've broadcast on all standard frequencies in every known language." No response. Zexthor's mandibles clicked in irritation. The Krillian Empire controlled over 300 star systems, commanded fleets that could glass entire worlds, and maintained a technological advantage that had kept them in power for millennia. Yet here was a simple, unimpressive vessel that refused to acknowledge their authority. "Sir," another officer interrupted, her scales shifting to a nervous yellow. "The High Council is demanding an immediate report. Word of the unknown ship has already spread through the fleet networks." The Admiral knew what that meant. Fear. For all their power, the Krillians had built their empire on a foundation of absolute control and predictability. They knew every threat, had contingencies for every scenario. The unknown was their greatest enemy. "Prepare a boarding party," Zexthor ordered. "Full combat protocols. If they won't answer our hails, we'll get our answers directly." The assault shuttle launched within the hour, carrying 50 of the Empire's finest warriors. Each stood 3 meters tall, encased in powered armor that could withstand direct hits from plasma cannons. They approached the mysterious ship with weapons charged and ready. "No defensive screens detected," the squad leader reported. "No weapon systems coming online. It's just sitting there. Proceed with boarding." The shuttle extended its docking tube, magnetic clamps securing it to the alien hull. Cutting lasers made short work of what appeared to be a simple airlock. The warriors poured through, expecting resistance, expecting a trap, expecting anything but what they found. Empty corridors. No crew. No bodies. Just silent, dimly lit passages that seemed to stretch on forever. The walls were covered in a script none of them recognized, and the air carried a strange scent that their suits couldn't quite identify. "Sir," one of the warriors called out, "you need to see this." In what appeared to be the ship's bridge, they found a single chair facing a bank of dark monitors. Sitting in the chair was a figure in a primitive environmental suit. The helmet's visor was cracked, revealing a face that made the warriors step back in surprise. It looked almost Krillian, but not quite. Where their species had 6 eyes, this creature had only 2. Where they had scales, it had smooth, pale skin. Where they had 4 arms, it had only 2. It was like looking at a distorted reflection, familiar yet alien. "Is it dead?" someone asked. The squad leader approached cautiously, scanner in hand. "Negative. It's in some kind of stasis. Life signs are minimal but stable." "Wake it up." Back on the flagship, Admiral Zexthor watched the live feed from the boarding party's cameras. His tactical staff had gathered around, all equally transfixed by the image of the alien creature. When the stasis field flickered and died, when those 2 strange eyes opened and looked directly at the camera, every Krillian in the room felt a chill run down their spines. The creature stood slowly, as if testing long and used muscles. It was smaller than a Krillian, perhaps only 2 meters tall. It looked at the warriors surrounding it with what might have been curiosity or amusement. Then it spoke. The universal translators struggled with the language, spitting out fragmented words and concepts. But one phrase came through clearly, in perfect Krillian, "Finally. I was beginning to think you'd never find me." The Admiral's eyes widened. How does it know our language? Before anyone could respond, every screen on the bridge flickered to life. The mysterious ship's computers had somehow interfaced with their systems, displaying streams of data that scrolled too fast to read. Star charts, technical schematics, biological data. Thousands of years of information compressed into seconds. And then, as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. Every screen showed the same image, a blue-green world orbiting a yellow star. The creature's voice echoed through their speakers. "My name is James Chun. I'm from Earth, and I've come to warn you." The bridge erupted in chaos. Officers shouted orders, defensive systems came online, fleet-wide alerts were issued. But Admiral Zexthor remained still, staring at the image of the unknown world. "Warn us about what?" he asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "About them," Chen replied. "The ones who destroy my world. The ones who are coming for yours." The tactical display suddenly lit up with new contacts. Not one or two, but thousands. Ships emerging from hyperspace at the edge of Krillian territory, each one bearing the same configuration as Chen's vessel, but armed with weapons that made their sensors scream warnings. "You see," Chen continued, his voice carrying a weight of infinite sadness, "I'm not a warning. I'm bait, and you just took it." The Krillian Empire, master of 300 systems, conqueror of 100 species, found itself facing an enemy it had never imagined. Not because they were powerful, though the approaching fleet suggested they were. Not because they were advanced, though their ability to hide from Krillian sensors proved they were. But because they were unknown. And in that moment, Admiral Zexthor understood the true terror of the void. It wasn't the darkness between stars or the cold emptiness of space. It was the knowledge that somewhere out there, beyond the edge of their maps and the reach of their sensors, were things they had never dreamed of. The first human ship fired its weapons. The Krillian defensive grid, designed to stop any known threat in the galaxy, failed to even slow the projectile. It punched through their shields like they were made of paper, through their armor like it was cloth, and detonated inside the flagship's power core. As emergency alarms screamed and the ship shuddered under secondary explosions, Admiral Zexthor had one final thought. They had ruled their corner of the galaxy for 10,000 years. They had believed themselves masters of the void. They were wrong. 3 days after the first human ship fired its devastating weapon, the Krillian Empire found itself in a state it had never experienced before: retreat. Across 17 star systems, their mighty fleets pulled back, abandoning frontier worlds and military installations that had stood for centuries. The evacuation was chaotic, panicked, and, above all, humiliating. In the emergency bunker beneath the Krillian homeworld surface, Supreme Commander Vexera studied the tactical reports with growing disbelief. Her 4 arms moved independently, manipulating different holographic displays, while her 6 eyes tracked multiple data streams simultaneously. 43 ships lost in the Iron system, her aide reported. The enemy used some kind of kinetic weapon that bypasses our shields entirely. Kinetic? Vexera's mandibles clicked in confusion. "You mean they're throwing rocks at us?" "Not rocks, Commander. Projectiles made from an unknown alloy, accelerated to near-light speed. Our scientists estimate each one carries the kinetic energy of a small moon impact." The absurdity of it burned in Vexera's mind. The Krillian Empire had developed beyond such primitive weapons eons ago. They used directed energy beams, antimatter torpedoes, singularity generators, weapons that could unmake matter at the quantum level. And yet these humans were defeating them with what amounted to very fast bullets. What about the prisoner? This James Chun, still in custody on Station Prime. He's been cooperative. Vexera stood, her massive frame casting shadows in the dim emergency lighting. "I want to speak with him." Now, the holographic connection established quickly, showing Chun sitting calmly in his cell. He had been given basic amenities, food, water, a place to rest, but had asked for nothing. He simply sat, waiting, as if he had all the time in the universe. Human, Vexera began, trying to keep the anger from her voice. Your people are slaughtering mine, destroying ships that have kept peace in this sector for millennia. What? Chun looked up at the hologram, his two eyes meeting her six without flinching. Peace? Is that what you call it? You conquered every species you encountered. You stripped their worlds of resources. You turned entire civilizations into servant races. We brought order. Vexera roared. We elevated primitive species, gave them technology, brought them into the galactic community. You brought chains, Chun replied quietly. Golden chains, perhaps, but chains nonetheless. And your species is different? You attack without warning, without attempts at diplomacy, without mercy. How does that make you better than us? For the first time, Chun smiled. It was a sad expression that somehow made him look ancient despite his relatively young features. We're not better. We're worse. Much worse. That's why you're going to lose. Before Vexera could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the bunker. New contacts on the sensors, not at the frontier this time, but deep within Krillian space. Somehow, the human fleet had bypassed their defensive lines entirely. Impossible, she breathed. Our hyperspace interdiction fields are designed to stop ships using hyperspace, Chun finished. We don't use hyperspace. The tactical display showed human vessels emerging from what looked like tears in space itself. Not the smooth transition of hyperspace travel, but violent ruptures that sent gravitic waves rippling outward. Wormhole technology? Vexera's scientific advisor gasped. But the power requirements alone would be impossible for a single ship. Yes, Chun agreed. But not for a fleet working in concert. Every human vessel is both a weapon and part of a larger mechanism. We learned long ago that unity is our greatest strength. More human ships appeared, surrounding key Krillian installations. Military stations that had never seen combat in 1,000 years suddenly found themselves under bombardment. The kinetic weapons were just the beginning. The humans deployed gravity bombs that crushed structures into microscopic points, nanoswarms that devoured hull plating, and electronic warfare systems that turned the Krillians' own automated defenses against them. Why tell me this? Buxara demanda. Why reveal your tactics? Because it doesn't matter if you know, Chun said simply. Understanding what we're doing won't help you stop it. He was right. Even as Krillian scientists scrambled to adapt their defenses, the human attacks evolved. Each assault was different, each tactic novel. It was as if they had spent years studying Krillian technology and doctrine, preparing countermeasures for every possible response. How long? Vexera asked. How long have your people been watching us? Since before your empire existed, Chun admitted. We've been out here for a very long time, Commander. Watching, learning, preparing. Preparing for what? For the day we have to stop you. The Supreme Commander's scales shifted to a deep purple of rage. Stop us? We maintained order. We prevented wars between species. You prevented growth, Chun interrupted. Evolution. Change. You created a static galaxy where every species existed only to serve your empire. You stopped them from becoming what they could be. And what gave you the right to decide their fate instead? Nothing, Chun said. We don't want to decide anyone's fate. We just want to give them the chance to decide for themselves. Another alarm sounded. The human fleet had reached the Krillian homeworld's outer defense perimeter. Vexera watched as her most powerful warships engaged the invaders. Plasma beams that could slice moons in half splashed harmlessly against some kind of adaptive armor. Antimatter torpedoes were swatted aside by point defense systems that seemed to predict their trajectories before they were even fired. And through it all, the human ships advanced inexorably, returning fire with those impossibly simple kinetic weapons that punched through shields and armor as if they didn't exist. Your empire was built on a simple premise, Chun explained, watching the battle through the same display. That technological superiority equals invincibility. But technology is just a tool. What matters is how you use it, and more importantly, why. Pretty words from someone whose people are committing genocide. Are we? Chen asked. Check your casualty reports, Commander. Really check them. Vexera pulled up the data, expecting to see millions dead. Instead, she found something that defied belief. While ship after ship had been destroyed, the actual death toll was remarkably low. Escape pods had been allowed to evacuate. Life support systems had been carefully avoided in the attacks. Even ground installations had been given warning before orbital bombardment. You're not trying to destroy us, she said slowly. You're trying to defeat us. There's a difference, Chen agreed. Your empire needs to fall, Commander. But your species doesn't need to die with it. And then what? You'll rule in our place. No, nobody will. That's the point. The human fleet had broken through the outer defenses now. Vexera could see them approaching the homeworld itself. But instead of bombardment, they were broadcasting something. On every frequency, in every language of every species the Krillians had conquered. People of the galaxy, the message began. For too long you have lived under the rule of an empire that claimed to protect you while denying you the freedom to grow, to change, to become what you were meant to be. That time is ending. The Krillian Empire's military might is broken. Their fleets are scattered. Their ability to enforce their will upon you is gone. What comes next is up to you. Govern y salvas. Choose your own paths. Make your own mistakes and celebrate your own triumphs. The humans of Earth stand ready to help any who ask for it, but we will not rule over you. We will not replace one empire with another. Your fate is your own. Across 300 star systems, species that had been subjects for millennia heard the message. Some celebrated, some panicked, some didn't believe it. But all of them began to think about something they hadn't considered in generations, what they would do with freedom. You're going to create chaos, Vexera said. Wars will break out. Billions will die. Maybe, Chen admitted, but they'll die free, and their children will live free. And eventually, they'll learn to live together not because someone forces them to, but because they choose to. You're gambling with the lives of an entire galaxy. Yes, Chen said simply, because the alternative is letting them remain slaves forever. Even comfortable slaves. Even slaves who don't realize what they are. The Supreme Commander slumped in her chair, the weight of defeat settling on her shoulders. Her empire, 10,000 years of order and control, was crumbling in a matter of days. Not from superior technology or overwhelming numbers, but from an idea, the idea that freedom, however chaotic, was better than peaceful servitude. What happens to us? She asked. To the Krillians? Whatever you decide, Chen replied. You can try to maintain your empire by force, though I don't think that will go well. You can isolate yourselves on your homeworld. You can try to find a new place in a galaxy of equals. The choice, Commander, is yours, just like it's everyone else's. And if we choose to fight, then we'll stop you. Not destroy you, but stop you. However, many times it takes. Vexera cut the connection. Around her, her staff waited for orders. The human fleet hung in orbit, weapons powered, but not firing. Waiting. The entire galaxy seemed to be holding its breath. She thought about the empire her ancestors had built, the peace they had enforced, the order they had maintained. It had seemed so noble, so necessary. They had prevented countless wars, saved countless lives. But at what cost? Commander, her aide prompted. Your orders? Vexera looked at the tactical display one more time. The human ships were smaller than theirs, less advanced in many ways. But they had something the Krillian Empire had lost long ago, purpose beyond mere dominance. Stand down all weapons, she ordered quietly. Commander, you heard me. Stand down. All fleets, all systems. The war is over. But the Empire ended the moment we forgot that order without freedom is just another word for death, Vexera said. Perhaps it's time we learned to live again. As her orders went out across the Krillian fleet, as weapons powered down and shields dropped, the human vessels began broadcasting again. This time, it wasn't a message of liberation. It was music. Simple, haunting melodies from a world none of them had ever seen. Songs of struggle and triumph, of loss and hope. songs that spoke of a species that had fought its own battles with empire and tyranny, and had learned the hard way that freedom was worth any price. In his cell, James Chun listened to the music of his homeworld and allowed himself a moment of grief. Earth was gone, destroyed in humanity's first encounter with a galactic empire even more ruthless than the Krillians. But humanity had survived, scattered among the stars, learning, growing, preparing. Now, they had returned, not as conquerors but as liberators. Not to build an empire, but to ensure no empire could ever again claim dominion over the galaxy. The Krillian Empire had fallen in 3 days. What would rise in its place would take generations to determine. But for the first time in 10,000 years, the choice belonged to the people of the galaxy themselves. 6 months had passed since the fall of the Krillian Empire, and the galaxy was burning. Not from war, but from the fires of revolution, transformation, and painful rebirth. On 1,000 worlds, species that had known only Krillian rule for generations struggled to create something new from the ashes of the old order. Captain Sarah Chun stood on the bridge of the human vessel Liberty's Price, watching the chaos unfold on the planet below. Zephyr 3 was in the grip of a civil war between 3 factions, each claiming to represent the true will of the Zephonite people. Buildings burned in the capital city, while refugees streamed toward the spaceports. Another freedom celebration gone wrong, her tactical officer muttered. Sarah shot him a sharp look. Freedom is messy, Lieutenant. It always has been. With respect, Captain, we've had 17 requests for intervention in the last week alone. How many more worlds need to tear themselves apart before we admit this isn't working? It was a fair question, one that haunted Sarah in the quiet moments between crises. The human fleet had shattered the Krillian Empire expecting liberation, but liberation and chaos were proving to be uncomfortable bedfellows. Her communications officer looked up. Captain, we're receiving a priority message from Admiral Torres. She wants you at the Emergency Council meeting. Where? Babylon Station. They're calling in all sector commanders. Sarah nodded. Babylon Station had become the de facto center of human operations, a massive structure built in neutral space, where representatives from hundreds of species could meet safely. If they were calling in all commanders, something significant was happening. The journey took 3 days through the wormhole network. Sarah found herself thinking about her ancestor, James Chun, whose sacrifice had made their victory possible. He had lived just long enough to see the Empire fall, dying peacefully in his cell with a smile on his face. She wondered what he would think of the galaxy they had created. Babylon Station was a marvel of human engineering, a cylinder 30 kilometers long spinning in the void. Its docking bays could accommodate ships from any species, its atmospheric systems could create environments for any biology, and its defensive systems could repel any attack. It was meant to be a symbol of unity, but as Sarah's shuttle approached, she could see the signs of strain. Protests had broken out in the alien quarters. Different species clustered in their own sections, eyeing each other with suspicion. Security forces, carefully mixed to include members of multiple species, struggled to maintain order. Admiral Torres met her at the docking bay. The older woman looked tired, her usually immaculate uniform showing signs of hasty dressing. Sarah, good, you made it. How bad is your sector? 3 civil wars, 2 attempted genocides, and 1 species that's decided to worship us as gods, Sarah replied. So about average. Torres didn't smile. It's worse here. The Vorkathi are threatening to restart their expansion if we don't intervene. The Cylon Confederate is falling apart, and we just got word that the Krillians are mobilizing again. What? Sarah felt her blood run cold. But they surrendered, a faction of hardliners seized control of their military installations. They're calling themselves the True Empire and claiming the surrender was invalid. Torres led her through the station's corridors, past windows showing the swirl of stars beyond. They've already retaken 12 systems. How many ships do they have? Enough. And, worse, some of the subject species are joining them. Turns out, some people prefer the certainty of tyranny to the uncertainty of freedom. They reached the council chamber, a vast amphitheater where hundreds of holographic projections showed commanders from across human space. At the center stood Director Maya Patel, the woman who had coordinated humanity's long preparation for this moment. Commanders, Patel began without preamble, we face a crisis, not from our enemies, but from our success. The galaxy is free, but freedom without structure leads to chaos. Chaos leads to suffering, and suffering leads people to seek any alternative, even a return to slavery. The hologram shifted, showing a map of the galaxy. Large sections were marked in red, zones of conflict, instability, or outright collapse. We have three options, Patel continued. First, we can maintain our current policy of non-intervention, allowing each species to find their own way regardless of the cost. Second, we can abandon this space entirely, retreating to human territory and leaving the galaxy to sort itself out. Or third, she paused, seeming to steel herself. We can accept that freedom requires guidance and take a more active role in shaping the post-Empire galaxy. The chamber erupted in debate. Some commanders argued for staying the course, others for withdrawal. But a growing number spoke in favor of the third option, each citing the horrors they had witnessed in their sectors. Sarah listened to the arguments with growing unease. They had destroyed the Krillian Empire because it imposed order without freedom. Now, they were discussing imposing their own version of order, convinced they would somehow do it better. You're all missing the point, she said, standing up. The chamber fell silent, all eyes turning to her. We're trying to solve the wrong problem. The issue isn't that these species can't govern themselves. It's that they've forgotten how. The Krillians didn't just conquer them militarily. They conquered them culturally, psychologically. They created dependent populations who've never had to make real choices. So what do you suggest, Captain? Patel asked. Education. Not military intervention. Not political manipulation. Education. Send teachers, not soldiers. Help them rediscover their own histories, their own values. Show them how we humans learn to balance freedom and responsibility, but don't force them to copy us. Let them find their own ways. That could take generations, someone objected. Yes, Sarah agreed. Just like it took us generations to go from warring tribes to a unified species. There are no shortcuts to genuine freedom. The debate continued for hours, but Sarah could see opinions shifting. The hardliners who wanted to impose human rule were a minority. Most recognized the wisdom in her approach, even if they worried about the short-term costs. Finally, Director Patel called for a vote. The education initiative passed by a wide margin, with provisions for limited military intervention only to prevent genocides or aggressive expansion. As the meeting broke up, Admiral Torres pulled Sarah aside. That was well spoken, but you know this means the dying won't stop anytime soon. I know, Sarah admitted, but at least they'll be dying for their own choices, not ours. James Chun would have been proud of you. Sarah wasn't sure about that. Her ancestor had been willing to sacrifice himself to break the empire. She wondered if he would have had the patience to watch the slow, painful process of rebuilding. Over the following weeks, the new policy went into effect. Human teachers, historians, and cultural specialists spread across the galaxy. They brought not weapons, but libraries, not ultimatums, but conversations. They helped species rediscover their pre-empire histories, their ancient philosophies, their forgotten arts. The results were mixed. Some worlds embraced the opportunity, diving into their rediscovered heritage with enthusiasm. Others rejected it, clinging to Krillian structures or falling into chaos. The true empire continued to grow, gathering those who preferred the old certainty to the new freedom. Sarah found herself on Niron Prime, once a jewel of the Krillian Empire, now a world struggling to define itself. She walked through the capital with Zekval, a young Thyronian who had become one of their first indigenous teachers. My grandmother remembers the time before the Empire, Zekval said, gesturing at the abandoned Krillian administrative building they were passing. She was a child when they came. She says we were warriors then, proud and free, but also constantly at war with ourselves. And now we must learn to be warriors of a different kind. Warriors of thought, of culture, of choice. He paused, looking at the stars visible through the twilight sky. It's harder than the old way. But my grandmother says it's worth it. They were interrupted by an alert from Sarah's communicator. The True Empire had attacked a human education outpost, killing 30 teachers and destroying centuries of recovered historical data. Will you retaliate? Zekval asked. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. The old Sarah, the soldier who had helped break the Empire, would have struck back immediately. But the teacher she was trying to become knew better. No, she said finally. We'll defend our people, but we won't be drawn into their war. The True Empire will fall the same way the original did. Not from our weapons, but from the simple fact that freedom, once tasted, can never be fully suppressed. And if you're wrong, then we'll have to live with the consequences of believing in something better than might makes right. As they continued their walk, Sarah received updates from across the galaxy. The Vorkathi had stepped back from expansion after their youth movements demanded reform. The Cylon Confederate had split into 5 smaller nations, but they were talking instead of fighting. And on 100 worlds, beings were learning to ask questions that had been forbidden for millennia. Who are we? What do we want? How shall we live? The galaxy was still burning, but Sarah began to see that not all fires were destructive. Some are the flames of forge and hearth, burning away the old to create something new. It would take time, generations, perhaps centuries, but something beautiful was being born from the ashes of empire. That night, Sarah stood on her ship's observation deck, looking out at the stars. Each point of light represented a world full of beings struggling to find their way. It would have been easier to rule them, to impose human values and human order. But that would have made them no better than the Krillians. The hardest part of giving someone freedom, she said to the stars, thinking of James Chun and his sacrifice, is letting them use it. Her communications officer approached. Captain, we've received a message from the Krillian homeworld. Supreme Commander Vexera wants to discuss joining the education initiative. She says her people need to remember who they were before they became conquerors. Sarah smiled. Perhaps there was hope after all. The Empire had fallen, but from its ruins, something unprecedented was emerging. Not a new empire, but a galaxy of free peoples learning to stand together by choice rather than force. Tell the Supreme Commander we'd be honored to help, Sarah said. And remind her that the first lesson of freedom is that teachers can learn as much from their students as students from their teachers. As her ship turned toward Krillian space, Sarah thought about the long road ahead. There would be more conflicts, more setbacks, more moments of doubt. But for the first time since the Empire fell, she believed they were on the right path. The galaxy was no longer in panic. It was in transformation, and that, Sarah knew, was exactly as it should be. 10 years had passed since the fall of the Krillian Empire, and the galaxy had transformed beyond recognition. Where once a single power had imposed uniform order, now hundreds of independent states, confederations, and alliances dotted the star maps. The transformation hadn't been without cost. Wars had been fought, millions had died, entire civilizations had collapsed and reformed. But from the chaos, something new was emerging. Marcus Chun, great-grandson of the legendary James Chun, stood before the Galactic Assembly on Babylon Station. As the first human ambassador to the newly formed Interstellar government, he carried the weight of his ancestors' legacy on his shoulders. The assembly hall was packed with representatives from over 300 species, each bringing their own perspectives, grievances, and hopes to the table. Honored representatives, Marcus began, his voice carrying across the vast chamber through advanced translation systems. We gather here not as conquerors and conquered, not as teachers and students, but as equals seeking a common path forward. In the Krillian delegation, former Supreme Commander Vexera listened intently. The years had changed her. Where once her scales had gleamed with the polish of absolute authority, now they bore the duller sheen of hard-won wisdom. The Krillians had undergone perhaps the most dramatic transformation of any species, voluntarily dismantling their military infrastructure and dedicating themselves to becoming mediators and peacekeepers. The motion before us today, Marcus continued, concerns the establishment of a joint defense force to combat the growing threat of the Void Hunters. A ripple of unease passed through the assembly. The Void Hunters had appeared 3 years ago, a mysterious force that attacked shipping lanes and isolated colonies without warning or apparent motive. Some suspected they were remnants of a true empire. Others believed they were an entirely new threat from beyond the galaxy's edge. The Vorkathi representative stood, his chitinous form clicking with agitation. The humans speak of joint defense, but we all know their technology remains superior. How do we know this isn't simply another form of empire, disguised as cooperation? It was an old argument, one that surfaced regularly. Despite humanity's efforts to share technology and knowledge, they remained the most advanced military power in known space. The wormhole drives, the kinetic weapons that had shattered Krillian shields, the adaptive armor, all were human innovations that other species struggled to replicate. Sarah Chun, now Admiral Chun, and Marcus's mentor, watched from the observer's gallery. She had argued against forming the joint force, believing each species should develop its own defenses. But the Void Hunter attacks were escalating, and pragmatism was winning over principle. The Vorkathi raised a valid concern, Marcus acknowledged, which is why we propose that the joint force be commanded not by a human, but by elected representatives from multiple species, rotating every solar year. Human technology will be shared freely, with training provided to ensure all members can operate and maintain it. Words, the Cellon representative interjected, her melodious voice carrying undertones of skepticism. The humans have promised much over the years. Yet still they hold secrets. Still, they maintain advantages. Marcus felt the familiar frustration rising, but kept his voice level. We've shared everything we can safely share. Some technologies require infrastructure and understanding that takes time to develop. We're not withholding them. We're trying to prevent disasters born from premature implementation. It was true, though he knew it sounded like an excuse. The full human technological suite included weapons that could crack planets, viruses that could rewrite DNA on a massive scale, and AI systems that bordered on true consciousness. Releasing such tools to civilizations still finding their way was like giving nuclear weapons to children. The debate continued for hours, with species aligning and realigning based on their interests. The former Krillian subject races were generally supportive, having benefited most from human intervention. The independent powers that had emerged from the chaos were more skeptical, seeing any joint force as a threat to their newfound sovereignty. During a recess, Marcus found himself in the station's observation lounge, looking out at the stars. Vexera approached, her footsteps surprisingly quiet for such a large being. "Your ancestor would be proud," she said, settling beside him. "You argue for unity without dominance. It's a difficult balance." "I'm not sure he'd approve," Marcus admitted. "James Chin broke your empire to give people freedom. Now I'm asking them to give some of it up for security. Freedom without security is just another form of chaos," Vexera observed. "We Krillians learned that the hard way. We imposed security without freedom and created a different kind of death. Perhaps together, all of us can find the balance that eluded us separately." "You really have changed," Marcus said, studying the former commander. 10 years ago, you would have been arguing for Krillian leadership of any joint force. Vexera's mandibles clicked in what he had learned was amusement. 10 years ago, I still believed that order was more important than choice. Now I understand that true order can only come from free beings choosing to work together. They were interrupted by an urgent alarm. The main display screens throughout the station lit up with tactical data. A Void Hunter fleet had been detected approaching the Thyron system. Not a raid this time, but a full invasion force. 50 ships, someone gasped. Where did they get 50 ships? The assembly reconvened in emergency session. The debate about the joint force was suddenly moot. They needed to respond to this threat immediately, or the Thyron would fall. "The human Third Fleet is closest," Admiral Chun reported via hologram. "We can be there in 6 hours. The Krillian peacekeepers can provide support," Vexera added. "Our ships aren't armed, but our shields could protect evacuation vessels." One by one, Other species volunteered resources. The Vorkathi had a squadron in the area. The Selans could provide medical ships. Even the isolationist Zephanites offered their scout vessels for reconnaissance. This is what we could be, Marcus said, seizing the moment. Not a human empire or a return to Krillian dominance, but a true alliance. Different species, different strengths, united by choice rather than force. The vote was called. The Joint Defense Force was approved by a margin of 247 to 53. As fleets from a dozen species raced toward the Iran, something unprecedented happened. The various commanders, instead of asserting dominance or demanding precedence, began coordinating. Human tactical systems interfaced with Krillian shields. Vorkathi weapons platforms integrated with Cellon medical frigates. A patchwork fleet became something more, a unified force. The battle for the Iran would be remembered as a turning point. When the Void Hunters emerged from their hidden base in the system's asteroid belt, they faced not the scattered, divided galaxy they had been preying upon, but a united front. The fight was brutal. The Void Hunters possessed technology that seemed impossible, ships that phased in and out of reality, weapons that turned matter into energy, fighters that moved faster than physics should allow. But they faced something they hadn't expected: diversity. Human kinetic weapons punched through their phase shields. Krillian defensive matrices absorbed their energy weapons. Vorkathi boarding parties, evolved in the harsh gravity of their homeworld, overwhelmed their soldiers in hand-to-hand combat. Cellon cyber warriors cracked their communication codes. They're not from outside the galaxy, the intelligence officer reported mid-battle. They're us. All of us. Renegades from every species, united in believing that only the strong deserve to survive. It made sense in a twisted way. The fall of the Empire had liberated not just the oppressed, but also the worst elements of every society. While the mainstream civilizations struggled toward cooperation, the extremists had found each other, pooling their resources and resentments into a nihilistic force. "Sir," the tactical officer called out, "the Void Hunter flagship is powering up something big. Energy readings are off the scale." On the screen, they watched as the massive vessel began to glow with an unholy light. Whatever weapon it was preparing would devastate the combined fleet. "All ships, concentrate fire on that flagship," the Joint Commander, a Thyronian elected just hours before, ordered. But it was Vexera who provided the solution. "Wait," she said, studying the readings. "That's modified Krillian technology. A planet cracker we developed, but never deployed. I know its weakness." She transmitted coordinates and specifications to the fleet. Within seconds, a surgical strike was organized. Human ships provided covering fire while a mixed squadron of Krillian and Vorkathi vessels executed a precise attack on the weapon's power coupling. The explosion was visible from Thyron's surface. The Void Hunter flagship disappeared in a ball of fire that briefly outshone the system's sun. Without their command ship, the remaining raiders fell into disarray and were quickly defeated or captured. In the aftermath, as rescue operations commenced and the Allied fleet regrouped, Marcus stood on the bridge of the human flagship, watching the various species work together. It wasn't perfect. There were still disputes, misunderstandings, friction, but it was real. The vote passed, Admiral Chun informed him. The Galactic Assembly has authorized not just a joint defense force, but a permanent cooperative structure. Military, scientific, cultural exchanges. Not an empire, but an alliance. What changed their minds? We did. All of us. Seeing what we could accomplish together. She paused, looking at the mixed fleet with something like wonder. Your ancestor broke an empire. You might have just helped build something better. Marcus thought about James Chun, dying alone in a Krillian cell, believing his sacrifice would give the galaxy freedom. He had succeeded beyond his wildest dreams, but freedom alone hadn't been enough. It had taken another generation to learn that freedom meant the choice to stand together. The Void Hunters were revealed to be a symptom of a larger problem. Those who couldn't adapt to a galaxy without empires, who preferred dominance to cooperation. But their defeat at Thyron sent a message. The age of empires was truly over. In its place, something unprecedented was rising. "Sir," the communications officer interrupted, "we're receiving a transmission. It's from deep space beyond our charts." The message was simple, broadcast in perfect human standard. "We have been watching. The test is complete. The galaxy has proven itself ready. We are coming." The bridge fell silent. After everything they had been through, the fall of the Empire, the chaos of liberation, the threat of the Void Hunters, now they faced something new, something from beyond their known space. "Who are they?" someone asked. Marcus looked at the star charts, at the vast, unexplored regions beyond their borders. Humanity had fled to the stars after Earth's destruction, had spent centuries preparing to liberate the galaxy from the Krillians. But they had always wondered who had destroyed Earth and why. "I think," Marcus said slowly, "we're about to find out why James Chen's sacrifice was just the beginning." The United Fleet turned toward deep space, facing the unknown together. Whatever came next, they would meet it not as humans or Krillians or any single species, but as free peoples of the galaxy, united by choice and strengthened by their diversity. The Empire had fallen. The Alliance had risen. And somewhere in the void, the true test of both their freedom and their unity was approaching. The ships came from the void between galaxies, vessels of impossible design that defied every known law of physics. They didn't emerge from hyperspace or tear through wormholes. They simply appeared, as if reality itself had blinked and found them suddenly present. One moment the border sensors showed empty space. The next, a fleet of crystalline vessels hung motionless at the galaxy's edge. Marcus Chun stood in the Joint Command Center on Babylon Station, surrounded by representatives of every major species in the Alliance. The past year had seen unprecedented cooperation as they prepared for this moment. The message announcing the coming of these beings, who called themselves the Architects, had united the galaxy more effectively than any treaty. "Sensor analysis complete," the Vorkathi science officer reported. "The vessels appear to be constructed from some form of living crystal. Energy signatures are incomprehensible. Their simultaneously reading is powered up and completely inert. Any response to our communication attempts?" Marcus asked. "Negative. We've tried every frequency, every language, even quantum entanglement communication. Nothing." Former Supreme Commander Vexera studied the tactical display with her 6 eyes. "They're waiting for something. But what?" The answer came 12 hours later. Every sentient being in the galaxy, human, Krillian, Vorkathi, Cellon, and hundreds of other species, experienced the same thing simultaneously. Not a message through their communication devices, but a presence in their minds, ancient and vast. Children of this galaxy, the voice spoke directly to their consciousness, bypassing language entirely. "We are the Architects. Long ago, we seeded life throughout the cosmos, each galaxy an experiment in evolution and consciousness. Your galaxy was meant to develop unity through diversity, strength through cooperation. The Krillian Empire perverted this design, creating stagnation where there should have been growth. The humans corrected this error, but at great cost. Images flashed through their minds. Earth, green and blue and beautiful before its destruction. But the destroyers weren't who humanity had believed. The Krillians hadn't destroyed Earth. The Architects had. Marcus felt rage surge through him, matched by similar emotions from every human in the galaxy. His ancestor had died believing he was fighting the Krillians for humanity's survival, but it had all been a manipulation. Why? He managed to speak aloud, though he knew the Architects could hear his thoughts. Because humanity needed to scatter. One world made you vulnerable. One government made you rigid. You needed to spread across the stars, to learn and grow and prepare. Earth's destruction was a catalyst, painful, but necessary. Just as the Krillian Empire's dominance was necessary to unite the other species, until it too had served its purpose and needed to be removed. You're saying you orchestrated all of it? Vexera's mental voice was filled with horror. 10,000 years of empire, the wars, the deaths, James Chen's sacrifice. All of it was your design. Not orchestrated. Guided. We plant seeds, but how they grow depends on you. The Krillians could have chosen benevolent leadership, but chose dominance. Humanity could have become conquerors, but chose liberation. Each species made their own choices. We merely ensured those choices had consequences. And now? Marcus demanded. Why reveal yourselves now? Because your galaxy has passed the test. Unity through diversity has been achieved. Former enemies work together. Former slaves stand as equals. You have learned the balance between freedom and responsibility, chaos and order. You are ready for the next phase. The crystalline ships began to move, spreading out across the galaxy's border. As they did, space itself seemed to shimmer and change. What had appeared to be empty void beyond the galactic edge suddenly revealed itself to be filled with stars, not distant galaxies, but systems hidden behind some incomprehensible barrier. The universe is vaster than you know, the architects continued. Your galaxy is one of thousands, each developing according to its own path. Some fell to eternal war, others to stagnant peace. Some destroyed themselves. Others transcended physical existence entirely. You have achieved something rare, unity without uniformity, peace without oppression. So what happens now? Someone asked. Do you rule us? Test us further? Destroy us if we fail? For the first time, the mental voice carried something like amusement. Rule you? We are gardeners, not kings. Our time of direct intervention is ending. The barriers between galaxies will fall. You will meet other civilizations, some more advanced, some less, some peaceful, some hostile. What you do with these encounters is your choice. But know this, the unity you have built will be tested. There are civilizations out there that make the old Krillian Empire look benign. There are threats that no single species, no matter how advanced, can face alone. The alliance you have forged is not just your achievement. It is your only hope of survival. The presence began to fade from their minds, but one last message came through, directed specifically at Marcus Chun. Your ancestor knew he would not live to see the galaxy free. He accepted that his role was to plant a seed that others would nurture. You have helped that seed bloom. Honor his sacrifice not by mourning what was lost, but by protecting what has been built. As the mental connection ended, beings across the galaxy looked at each other with new understanding. They had been manipulated, yes, but they had also been given the freedom to choose their responses. The architects hadn't forced the Krillians to become tyrants or the humans to become liberators. They had simply created conditions where choices had to be made. Orders, sir? The tactical officer asked. Marcus looked around the command center at the diverse faces watching him. Krillians who had once been conquerors, Vorkathi who had once been warriors, Selens who had once been artists enslaved to serve an empire's glory. All now united by shared purpose. Send a message to all Alliance vessels, he said. We prepare for first contact. Defensive positions at the border, but weapons powered down. We meet whoever comes as potential friends, but ready to defend ourselves if necessary. The humans taught us that freedom was worth fighting for, Vexera added. Now we must prove that we know how to preserve it. Over the following days, the galaxy transformed yet again. The barrier's fall revealed not just new stars, but entire civilizations. Some reached out in friendship, eager to trade and share knowledge. Others probed for weakness, testing the alliance's resolve. A few simply watched, as enigmatic as the architects themselves. The first major test came from a civilization that called itself the Hegemony, a massive empire that had consumed 3 galaxies and viewed all other life as resources to be harvested. Their scouts appeared at the border, scanning and analyzing, preparing for invasion. They have us outnumbered 1,000 to 1, the analysis came back. Technology that makes even human weapons look primitive. By all calculations, we can't win. The old Krillian Empire would have surrendered or tried to join them, Vexera said. The scattered species of 10 years ago would have been conquered piecemeal. But we're neither of those things anymore. The Alliance response was unlike anything the Hegemony had encountered. Instead of military resistance or submission, they faced something else entirely: unity. Every species contributed their unique strengths. human tactical innovation, Krillian defensive expertise, Vorkathi warrior spirit, Selwan diplomatic skills, and hundreds of other perspectives combined into something unprecedented. When the hegemony attacked, expecting easy victory, they found their weapons countered by defenses they hadn't imagined. Their tactics were predicted by minds that thought in ways they couldn't comprehend. Their attempts to divide and conquer failed against species who had learned to trust each other through trial and hardship. The battle raged for days across multiple systems. Losses were heavy on both sides, but the alliance held. More importantly, their resistance inspired something in the other watching civilizations. A confederation of peaceful species offered support. A warrior culture that had been planning its own expansion decided to join the defense instead. Even some within the hegemony itself, client species who had been absorbed against their will, began to rebel. Their withdrawing, the report came in with disbelief. The hegemony is actually retreating. It wasn't a complete victory. The hegemony still existed, still threatened. But they had been stopped, turned back by an alliance that by all logic should have crumbled at first contact. This is just the beginning, Marcus said, watching the tactical displays. There will be other threats, other challenges. But we've proven something important, that unity through diversity isn't just a nice idea. It's a survival strategy. In the months that followed, the alliance grew. Civilizations that had hidden behind their own barriers emerged. Species that had resigned themselves to eventual conquest found hope. The galaxy that had once knelt before a single empire now stood as a beacon to others, proof that there was another way. Marcus often thought about James Chun in those days. His ancestor had believed he was striking a blow for human revenge, only to discover he was part of a larger plan. But did that diminish his sacrifice? Marcus didn't think so. James had chosen to act on the information he had, to fight for what he believed was right. That the truth was more complex didn't make his choice less noble. Standing on the observation deck of Babylon Station, now expanded to accommodate representatives from 100 galaxies, Marcus watched the constant flow of ships. Vessels of every possible design, carrying beings of every imaginable form, all meeting in peace to trade, learn, and grow together. Your ancestor would be proud, Sarah Chun said, joining him. The old admiral moved slowly now, but her eyes were still sharp. This isn't the galaxy he imagined, but it's better than what he found. Do you think we're still being manipulated? Marcus asked. The architects say they've withdrawn, but how would we know? Does it matter? Sarah replied. We make our choices based on what we know and what we believe is right. If there's some grand design beyond our understanding, we can't let that paralyze us. We can only do our best with what we have. She was right, Marcus knew. The galaxy, the universe, was full of forces beyond their control. But they had learned something crucial. While they couldn't control everything, they could control how they responded. They could choose unity over division, hope over fear, growth over stagnation. A communication alert chimed. Another new civilization had been discovered, this one sending signals that suggested they were in trouble. Without hesitation, the alliance began organizing a response. Ships from a dozen species prepared to launch, not knowing what they would find but ready to help if they could. As Marcus watched them depart, he thought about the panic that had gripped the Krillian Empire when James Chen's ship had first appeared. That panic had been justified. It had heralded the end of their age. But from that ending, something far greater had emerged. The age of empires was over. The age of alliance had begun. And in a universe full of wonders and terrors, of architects and hegemonies, of freedom and responsibility, the children of the galaxy stood ready to face whatever came next. Together.